Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Press Reports. It's our magazine show where we do a deep dive on a single topic. Well, this one is a pretty big single topic. It's our preview of the 2022 midterms and the battle for Congress and the fight for control of state houses. And before we get into the overall political environment, how about a little history? President Biden and his Democratic Party faced some strong political headwinds simply for winning. Why do I say that? Because look at this. Going back to John Kennedy in 1962 midterms, every single president we've had, except one, lost seats in the first midterm they had in office. The one, sort of the post 9/11 midterms of 2002. And I think I just explained why that was a unique situation. And by the way, this gets worse in these highlighted years. Because guess what, these highlighted years, this is when the first-term president had a Gallup job approval rating of less than 50%. So these presidents, when their job rating was below 50, ended up losing an average of 43 House seats. It's a big warning sign for Democrats as President Biden's approval rating hovers in the low 40s near the end of his first year of office. And if you look right now, overall, the political climate at the end of 2021, not very good for Democrats right now. In the New Jersey governor's race, Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy barely squeaked by. The national Republicans, by the way, before I get to Virginia here, the national Republicans barely touched this race. People wrote off Jack Ciattarelli. People assumed it's a 16-point Biden state. Well, as you can see, despite Murphy outspending Ciattarelli, this was a nail-biter. Virginia, of course, was the bellwether we were all watching. Republicans last won the governor's mansion in 2009, and this was their first victory since then. And this, as you can see, is what got Republicans excited. But when you add up New Jersey and Virginia from 2021, you realize this is a tough political climate.
All righty, Virginia, we won this thing!
Republican Glenn Youngkin's victory just a year after Biden carried Virginia by 10 points is a catastrophic loss for Democrats. And a nail-biter in blue New Jersey, a state Biden won by 16 points, is deepening the sense of alarm. Overseas, ahead of the vote, President Biden denied the results or a referendum on his performance in office.
I've not seen any evidence that whether or not I am doing well or poorly, whether or not I've got my agenda passed or not, is going to have any real impact on winning or losing.
Republicans hope to make Biden the fifth consecutive president to lose both Senate and House majorities. Bill Clinton lost 54 House seats and 8 in the Senate in 1994.
I think that I have some responsibility for it. I'm the president.
Obama lost 63 in the House and 6 in the Senate back in 2010.
I'm not recommending for every future president that they take a shellacking like I did last night.
Trump's Republican Party lost 40 House seats in 2018.
Carlos Cubella, Mike Kaufman. Too bad, Mike. Mia Love gave me no love.
Though the GOP did gain 2 Senate seats before losing control of the body in Georgia elections this past year. In 2022, to win control of the House, Republicans need to pick up just 5 seats. And the Senate balance of power is, of course, 50-50, making every single race key to Senate control. Meanwhile, President Biden's job approval rating trails 9 elected post-World War II presidents in the fall of their first year in office. He trails everyone but Trump.
The polls are going to go up and down and up and down.
A messy debate over Biden's social spending plans has exposed the ideological divisions in the Democratic Party. And the loss in Virginia is ripping them open.
The Democrats have yet developed the will to win in 2022.
Republicans are looking to replicate Youngkin's approach, supporting Trump while staying at a distance from him personally.
Would you rally with Donald Trump if he came to Virginia this week?
Well, he's not coming.
Democrats hope that Donald Trump will insert himself even more, endorse unelectable candidates, energize Democratic voters, and act as a drag on Republican candidates in swing states.
President Trump is the first president, in the Republican side at least, to lose the House, the Senate, and the presidency in 4 years.
We don't have a snowball's chance in hell of taking back the majority without Donald Trump.
So let's start breaking all this down. I'm joined by a terrific panel. Stephanie Cutter is a Democratic strategist, former Obama deputy campaign manager, and certainly a veteran of West Wing's past. David Wasserman is the House editor for the Cook Political Report. Republican strategist Brad Todd, and Michelle Sindor, the moderator of PBS's Washington Week. All right, Mr. Wasserman, I'll let you sort of set the table here. Describe the political environment as it stands right now here post-November 2021 going into 2022.
This is a Jimmy Carter type political environment for Democrats right now, and full disclosure, I wasn't alive for those years.
I was just going to say that's quite the reference there.
But
sir.
Look, I think just as important as the statewide results, which are scary enough for Democrats in both states, you look down ballot at the legislative races, Republicans taking back the Virginia House of Delegates, picking up some seats in New Jersey as well. But if you were to superimpose the swing from 2020 to 2021 that you saw in these legislative districts on the entire U.S. House, Republicans would gain between 44 and 51 seats in 2022. And that's before you even factor in redistricting, which is likely to add even more to their total. Keep in mind, Republicans only need 5 seats to retake the House. So the question that I'm asking the next few months, how many Democratic retirements are we going to see?
Right. Yamiche, I want to put up some numbers from our last NBC News poll from the end of October. And it showed it was sort of Democrats and Republicans, which party would do a better job on different issues. Here's the issues that Republicans led on by double digits. Border security, not a surprise. Inflation, plus 24. I'll get to that in a minute. Crime, national security, the economy by 18 points. And then this is one that's going to drive Democrats crazy. Plus 13 on getting things done. The Democratic side, there were only just 4 areas where we found double-digit advantages for them. Climate change, coronavirus, education, and abortion. Do Washington Democrats understand where they are right now?
I think that Washington Democrats understand that they're on their heels after the dismal results of the November elections this year. President Biden is all but begging his party to pass these infrastructure plans because he understands that people need to see the change that they're talking about, the Democrats have been talking about now for more than a year. I also get the sense from Democrats that they understand that their own base is looking at them and saying, yes, fine, we understand why health care and giving us roads and bridges are important, but also what about our actual everyday lives? When you look at education being one of the issues that I think was key in the November election, these past November elections, Democrats have to really understand their messaging. And I think that there's also this real feeling that the country in some ways has gone too far after the death of George Floyd, if you talk about race, and you think about the way that there are Democratic-based voters who want to see police reform. But on the other side, there are conservative voters who are really worried about all the conversation about race, about all the conversation about this changing America.
Go ahead.
The Democrats are not going to get a bad election in 22 because they didn't perform, though. They're going to be it's going to be a bad election because they went too far. Absolute power leads to absolute overreach. We saw this in 2010, but I would tell you, the generic ballot that you just showed was never this good in 2010 for Republicans when they won 63 seats.
Stephanie, it seems on one hand, history is just against, like I said, Joe Biden and Democrats are vulnerable simply because they won, right? Like if you look on that history. How does it get bucked?
How does it get bucked?
Yeah, how do you buck that history?
Well, the number that bothers me most that you just put up is that Republicans are double digits ahead of Democrats of getting things done.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying this as a partisan, even though I am, that is not true. The thing that
get things undone, not done.
Yes, true.
Very bad. Say it honest.
Or preventing things from getting done. I think we need to do a better job talking about what we have gotten done. The American Rescue Plan. I've been arguing this from the hilltops. We need to talk about it. It put money in people's pockets. It helped open schools. We just got beat on education in Virginia.
Yeah.
We're the ones that opened schools and allowed kids to get off of virtual learning and get back into the classroom. We need to talk about that. And there's more things like that we can talk about. If you just look at where we were, less than a year ago, right when President Biden was taking office, the 90% of schools were closed. There was no operation for vaccine deployment. We didn't have a vaccine at that point. That list is very long of how different the country is today versus a year ago, but we don't talk about it.
The communication issue. All right, let's start getting into the nuts and bolts here. We're going to turn to the battle of the Senate as the competitive map comes into focus. Let's give you a little primer.
Well, what you do with your vote here in Georgia? Well, you changed America. If you win Ohio and if you win Florida, you win.
It is good to be back in Pennsylvania.
And it starts right here in the live free or die state of New Hampshire.
The battle for the Senate in 2022 is being fought in next cycle's presidential battleground. 9 states where control of the evenly divided chamber will be decided. 4 Democratic incumbents are looking to hold on to their seats in battleground races that currently lean Democratic. In all, Democrats have 14 seats to defend.
Winning this race is critical to keeping the Senate.
Republicans have 20 seats to defend, including 3 in toss-up races, where incumbents are retiring. There's also Marco Rubio's lean Republican race in Florida.
In 2022, Florida is going to have a choice between 2 very different candidates.
And Senator Ron Johnson's fight to defend his seat in Wisconsin, a toss-up. He's the only Republican running in a state Donald Trump lost last year.
This media did more to make sure that and interfere in our elections in 2020 than anything Russia or China ever could have hoped to achieve.
He would rather spend his time peddling even more conspiracy theories.
The wild card in the battle for the Senate? The fight between Republican leader Mitch McConnell and former President Donald Trump to handpick candidates in the Republican primaries.
Will you welcome the former president's involvement in the midterm?
Well, he has his own agenda, and my view is we're going to focus on this administration and the future.
The Republican Senate needs new leadership. I've been saying it for a long time. Mitch is not the guy.
Trump has already endorsed candidates that Mitch McConnell is not a fan of. In North Carolina,
I am giving him my complete and total endorsement.
In Pennsylvania,
it's an honor to have his endorsement, truly.
And in Georgia, where retired football player Herschel Walker just recently got McConnell's blessing.
These are 2 guys that, they've been at each other a little bit, but right now they agree that I'm the right man for the job.
Trump's efforts to purge the party of any elected officials who have crossed him have already produced 2 House retirements and a handful of competitive Senate primaries in red states like Alaska.
Lisa Murkowski is so out of touch that she even voted to remove Donald Trump from office.
We can have differing points of view. We can express them without degrading one another.
All right, let's get into these Senate races. And Stephanie, if you look at the battle for the Senate and the House, if you're the White House, the Senate you have to hold because the House looks like it's an uphill battle. What do you think is the best way forward there and the toughest race to defend?
Well, I mean, I think that they would also contend that we have to protect the House, too. But I understand the point.
Yeah.
There are several seats that we're defending where we have extremely strong candidates, whether it's Cortez Masto or Kelly in Arizona, Cortez Masto in Nevada, Warnock in Georgia, very strong candidate, great fundraiser. These are solid candidates with solid understanding of their states. How do they win? Well, we don't know exactly who they're going to end up running against, and those Republican primaries will be telling in terms of how people will run. The second factor is Trump has been on the sidelines. Trump is not going to be on the sidelines in 2022 for these Senate races, particularly when it comes to seeing out a vendetta, getting revenge on someone, making sure that people who did stand by him win. He is going to be part of the 2022 ballot. How that plays out, it is not the answer.
It doesn't look like it's going to matter, though. The Trump toxicity test in Virginia failed. Democrats ran 10,000 ads of trying to link Youngkin to Trump. I
totally agree with you, but it was very difficult to tie Youngkin to Trump. But if you have a different set of candidates running in 2022, either who have taken positions on Trump, campaigned with him, defended him, and are even blocking investigations.
We don't have elections about former presidents. They're about current presidents.
Except when they are injecting themselves into the race, into demanding litmus tests in terms of standing by him.
In the end, primary voters pick the nominees, though. Presidents don't pick them. Majority leaders don't pick them. And in a parlor game here in Washington, we all fancy that these people are hand-picked and hand-blessed, but primary voters do the picking.
Wasserman, do you have a race that you sit there, boy, that one will tell me a lot, more than others?
Well, let's not mince words here. If the election were held next week, I think Democrats would lose the entire Senate battlefield. I think Colorado would be closer than any of the 9 races that were just mentioned here.
It's the same as Virginia.
And no amount of money that Raphael Warnock or Mark Kelly raises, no amount of personally flawed candidates on the Republican side would save Democrats from the kind of environment that we saw in a Biden plus 10 state on Tuesday. So what needs to turn around for Democrats? Biden's approval rating. It can't be in the low to mid 40s. It's got to be at 50 or closer to it to give Democrats a shot at winning. what should be a toss-up race like Pennsylvania or North Carolina. And so, if I had to narrow it down to one race that I think is going to be quite telling, Pennsylvania, a state that Biden won, that both parties have competitive primaries for.
Right.
Democrats
could be messy primaries.
Messy primaries.
Yeah.
And Democrats want to make it a referendum on Sean Parnell and some of the personal troubles.
Yamiche, you got one you're very focused on?
Great. Georgia. I think that it's the first big test of, I would say, the Stacey Abrams wing of the party.
And the multiracial coalition that Democrats believe
the multiracial coalition, the flipping of Georgia to blue. Yeah. It will be telling to see whether or not Republicans can take that seat back. Obviously, it's a seat that in some ways in people's minds would lean red anyways. But when you have Raphael Warnock preaching at MLK's church, talking about voting rights, trying to get people really excited about the idea that they are fighting for their lives, for their survival, for the next generation of Georgians, then you have someone who I think is a formidable candidate. Of course, you have Herschel Walker, who is someone who is popular, who is someone who might get a lot of opposition research thrown at him, but who's someone that both Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell are backing, as you noted. So to me, it's a race that will tell us a lot about the atmosphere. Will also tell us a lot about the impact of these voting laws, because there are laws that, frankly, I know the GOP would say aren't focused on suppressing people, but Democrats would say they're voter suppression laws. So I think it's also interesting to see how that impacts the electorate.
You know what surprised me about Raphael Warnock? He's in a very purple state, but he votes like he's in a blue state. He should be doing what Kyrsten Sinema's doing. That's the path to get reelected for him, is to prove he's not really a far-left Democrat. He needs to prove that he's willing to buck his party. Name me one time he's bucked his party in a year. I can't think of it. When's one time he said the Democrats are too far left? He does.
A congregation every Sunday who's going to keep him not doing that, I think.
That's going to get the electorate to move him out, though.
I made you all pick one. The one I'm picking is Ohio, because I think Ohio has two interesting test cases here. Number one, the only shot Democrats have is if Tim Ryan actually campaigns in rural areas. And two, the power of Trump and these candidates. Is there can you be too Trumpy? Josh Mandel. I mean, I know you say it doesn't matter. Do you think you can get to a point where Ohio shouldn't be competitive, but does Mandel make it more competitive?
The Tim Ryan who voted against Nancy Pelosi could be formidable. The Tim Ryan who ran for president in 2020, trying to move left, won't be that formidable.
That's a fair point. I think Tim Ryan do you get? The voters see.
And I think on the Republican side, primaries tend to make candidates. Somebody tends to, in a crowded primary, sometimes somebody tends to get better as they earn the nomination. And so right now you can look at our field and say somebody's going to get better. In Ohio, I don't think Ohio goes Democrat in a great year.
It's a very elegant way to say you need your primary candidates to get better in Ohio. But
we're asking if candidates on the Republican side are too Trumpy in states that Trump himself won by 8 points twice. And the political environment's better for Republicans today than
Ohio
it was in 2020.
It doesn't go Democrat in the midterm year.
All right. I want to turn to governor's races now. Up until now, they've been defined by a single issue, COVID. But that is now changing. Here's a primer.
I mean, it's COVID stupid.
California Governor Gavin Newsom survived his recall on the handling of COVID. Voters called it their top issue, and those who selected it as most important broke overwhelmingly against the recall. And COVID is already dominating governor's races in 2022, where 9 states make up the battleground.
No mandates.
Ron DeSantis wants to defund schools where they're asking kids to wear a mask.
We cannot afford to play fast and loose with the rules.
How can you now, as a candidate for governor, say we shouldn't have mask mandates? You did it.
I can evolve and change. Nobody knew.
Several Republican governors have primary challenges, driven in part by conservative backlash to COVID mitigation efforts. Among them, Ohio's Mike DeWine.
Good evening.
Good evening.
In Idaho, where the lieutenant governor banned vaccine mandates when the sitting governor, Brad Little, was out of state.
He never mandated anything. The governor never mandated anything.
Interview's over.
And even in Alabama, after these comments.
It's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks.
While the economy is likely to be at the center of governor's races next year, Glenn Youngkin's campaign in Virginia is a blueprint for Republicans who want to run on cultural issues, even in blue states.
We're going to embrace our parents, not ignore them.
While some governors, both on the ballot and term limited, are already running for their next office.
That is way down the road. It's not anything that I'm planning for.
I'm running for re-election in South Dakota.
A year is a lifetime in politics.
I want to start. I'm obsessed with 2 governor's races. It's Florida and Michigan because they have 2024. Perhaps both of them, if they win, the incumbents, DeSantis and Whitmer, are automatically national players. for Michigan. I want to start with Michigan, Stephanie, because it feels like she's probably in the toughest race of anybody in the battleground states on the governor's side. COVID will be front and center. She's got a tough candidate. It'll say a lot. If she gets through this, I'd argue that she might be the next in line.
And you want me to agree or disagree with that?
Tell me about Michigan.
Look, you know, I think Democrats believe she's done a great job. And I think she has, you know, with the exception of the 2020 election and everything that came around that, she has been, you know, a pretty steady, pragmatic governor. When it comes to COVID, she single-handedly helped save tens of thousands of lives.
Will that be an asset or a liability?
I think we need to turn it into an asset.
Interesting.
And people who think it's a liability probably aren't voting for her anyway. So there is a group in the middle where we need to communicate with and explain exactly where we were and where we are now and how we got here.
Brad Todd, Ron DeSantis, I want to take you the flip side of this. I have been scratching my head wondering, why is he running for re-election? He already has the fast pass to Iowa. Is there risk here?
You know, I think Florida is moving slowly but steadily to the right. And I think the rising share of Republican votes among Hispanics mean that it's
I heard
pretty
this
hard.
story in 05.
It's hard to be.
Just so you know.
Well, Florida's always going to be a swing state as long as we live, but it's a swing state where Republicans have a pretty decided advantage right now. And Ron DeSantis is more popular right now than he was the day he was elected.
That's true.
And so I don't think, and Charlie Crist is the most used up, recycled politician you're going to come up with. I don't think he's scaring anybody. So I think Ron DeSantis views this as an easy re-election and a time for him to be on a statewide stage.
How nationalized do you expect governor's races to be this year versus being state-based? We always say, oh, no, people are state-based. I don't think so this time, right?
Yeah, pretty darn nationalized, I would say. And, you know, to Brad's point about Charlie Crist, I think a big problem for Democrats in Virginia was running Terry McAuliffe, someone who could not make the case that he was a change agent at a time when voters are looking for something different, even if Virginia is hesitant about electing a Republican.
I've heard this, and if Stacey Abrams wins and Charlie Crist loses, we're going to hear more of that argument, aren't we?
We are going to hear more of that argument, and it's an argument that frankly, progressive Democrats have been making for some time, which is let the bench breathe and let the bench actually come into power. Some of the most, I would say, electric people that are on the Democratic side are candidates who had to run against incumbents. When you think about AOC, when you think about the people who have risen above, I will say when it comes to sort of COVID, saving people's lives still feels like on the conservative side, like taking away people's freedoms. Yeah. And Democrats are really going to have to balance that.
The bench ran against Terry McAuliffe, though, and he beat the bench.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
That's true.
All right. We're going to have some fun here after this break. We're going to talk about some races you may be overlooking this cycle. Stick with us. All right, welcome back. Panel is still with me. Yamiche, what haven't we talked about? What's a race that you're, or a segment of this election that you think is getting overlooked?
Well, I don't know if it's overlooked as much as but it's my home state. It's Florida. I think Val Demings is someone to very, very much watch. She's a former police officer who's not going to be able to be typecast in the way that I think other Democrats
Eric Adams
will.
of the Democratic Senate candidates?
I think she could be. I think she could be. And I think Marco Rubio has some weaknesses that she could poke at. I also think Val Demings is raising some real amounts of money. That said, it's Florida. I think while it's still a swing state, it's a deeply red swing state. So she has her work cut out for her, but it's always something definitely
Every time Democrats find enough votes, Republicans find more votes.
Well, the older people continue to move into Florida.
There are, where my mom lives in Central Florida, every time I go back, I'm like, where did that community come from? Brad, what do you got?
Nevada Senate race. So Joe Biden beats Donald Trump by 26 among Hispanics. If he only beats him by 16, then Donald Trump carries the state.
Interesting.
And so I think in this midterm, with the Hispanic vote increasingly moving toward Republicans, and with Donald Trump not on the ballot, which will facilitate that even more in a state like Nevada, I think you have to look at Nevada's Senate race as one of the, if not the best opportunity to take out a Democrat.
You know, when you look at Nevada's socioeconomic demographics, it is surprising that it has been such a sort of a lean blue state. Mr. Washington.
I'm going to pick Alaska. And even though it's not a state that Democrats have a chance of winning, we're watching a quiet makeover of the Republican Party in progress in Republican primaries. And Alaska's top 4 primary system, which is new, was supposedly going to shield Lisa Murkowski, right? Because she could win with some Democratic votes, even if she's facing Republican in
ranked choice voting too, right?
Choice voting round, right?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about that. I think if she's up against a pro-Trump Republican, Kelly Tshibaka, in the final round of this election. Alaska is still a Trump plus 10 state. And Murkowski, I think voters see her as a Democrat much more than her image was in 2018.
That's for sure. How about you, Stephanie?
I think Pennsylvania, I know we talked about that a little bit at the beginning of the show, but, you know, Pennsylvania went blue with Biden, barely. It was traditionally a blue state that we lost in 2016. And this Senate race is a chance for us to test the theory that we can win with blue-collar Democrats and keep them on our side of the ledger. It's also interesting that for the Republicans running in the primary, they are flawed candidates, and they are doing the job that we should be doing in pulling out those flaws because they're killing each other. And, you know, does that produce a stronger Republican candidate? Likely, but it is going to air all that dirty laundry that Democrats will make use of in a general election? Absolutely. And it is a critical state for 2024.
Just for popcorn popping purposes, I'm obsessed with New York governor and the Democratic primary, because who here thinks there's a 100% chance that a guy named Cuomo doesn't run? Right? Would you say 100? Does anybody? Is that 100? Would you bet 100% chance that he doesn't run?
Not 100. I'd bet like 99.
I know. That primary is just getting full. Again, no national implications on that one.
Right, for the State House instead of the courthouse.
I'm just telling you, Cuomo wants redemption. He's going to look for it somewhere. This was terrific and a lot of fun. Thank you all. That's all we have for Meet the Press Reports for this episode. Join us for our next episode as we take a close look at the short documentaries in this year's Meet the Press Film Festival. It's a really good slate. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week right here on Peacock and this Sunday on Meet the Press.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.